John 21. Well, John's Gospel concludes here with a picture of Jesus walking ahead alone. And there's Peter walking behind him, and then John walking behind Peter. So there's Jesus going in front, Peter walking behind Jesus, and John walking behind Peter. So we read in verses 20 and 21, Peter therefore seeing him said to Jesus, Lord, and what shall this man do? And Jesus said to him, if I will that he remains until I come, what is that to you? You follow me. Imagine the scene with the three men walking in file, one behind the other. And Peter has taken his focus off Jesus and has glanced behind him at John. And he's concerned about the relationship between John and Jesus. Well, Jesus tells Peter not to worry about that, but instead follow him. To take his attention away from John, his fellow brother, instead of worrying about the walk of another disciple, and instead to focus personally upon following Jesus. This wasn't the only time, of course, when Peter's eyes had wandered away from Jesus. You remember when there was the storm on the lake, and Jesus appeared to the disciples who were in the boat, and Peter begins walking on the water towards Jesus, but he sees that the wind is strong. You only see the strength of wind by looking at something which it's blowing. So Peter took his gaze away from Jesus and looked back or looked at something else. And he began to sink. And so it was again here, exactly repeated. He took his gaze off Jesus and looked elsewhere, in this case back behind him towards John. And he was wondering about the relationship between Jesus and John, rather than solely focusing upon his own following of Jesus. And this is our problem too. To be a Christian means to have our focus, our gaze, solely upon Jesus. But we so easily get distracted, and we're especially distracted by our interest in other people, other disciples, and their following of Jesus. Does he really believe? Does she understand the doctrines correctly? Are they actually an apostate church? And these things take us away from where our personal focus should be, and that is upon Jesus. We need to allow his magnetic personality to pull us, to take us over, to have him as the dominant relationship in our lives. The one person whose every word and movement is wonderful to us and keeps our complete attention. And then we won't look anywhere else. How he relates to others, or whether indeed he relates to them, is all irrelevant compared to the wonder of knowing and following him ourselves.